Imagine this. You're on your honeymoon, you're in a beautiful Irish castle, and you've just married a very handsome and very famous poet. In a lot of the ways, he's the man of your dreams. But he's ignoring you, and he's spending all of his time writing poetry about his former crush. Or no, actually, he's writing poetry about the daughter of his former crush, who is also his former crush as well. What would you do? I'm Heidi, and this is Obsession, where we get horribly obsessed with the weird and the unusual, and I hope that you do too. And while I'm telling these stories, I like to do a bit of drawing. I like to illustrate the things that I'm talking about. And when I finish the picture, I'll show you at the end. And you might like to join me. So, today we are going to be talking about a famous Irish poet, his wife, and a whole cast of extremely clever supernatural creatures. So, William Butler Yeats, and yes, we are talking about William Butler Yeats, was and still is a prominent Irish poet, known for being as mystical as he was political and poetical. He was born in 1865. He was a founder of the Abbey Theatre, and in later life he became a senator, but don't worry, we're not going to be talking about that. He also had a rich, lifelong interest in the occult, and this informed both his artistic output and his personal life. A member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Yeats was a key person in Ireland's mystical community, but more on that shortly. He was also notoriously unlucky in love. Well, aren't we all, William? He had 20 years of unrequited love for the actress Maud Gonne. Well, I mean, can you blame him? She was kind of gorgeous, but he followed her around for about 20 years like a sad little puppy dog before she graciously allowed him to spend the night with her. I think he was very lucky. But the next morning, Yeats proposed marriage to her for the final time, and she rejected him. Realizing that his obsession with Maud had cost him decades of living in a romantic fantasy, Yeats decided to move on. But, by moving on, he turned his interest to Maud's 22-year-old daughter. A little bit creepy, William, just saying. Well, she unsurprisingly turned him down, and I don't blame her. Heartbroken, but resilient, Yeats decided that this was the year that he would find a wife. Now, this could have been because of his age. He was in his 50s. But it could also be because a member of the Golden Dawn had written up his horoscope and told him that he needed to be married in the year of 1919, and it was the year of 1919. He proposed to 27-year-old Georgie Hyde-Lees, and she was very happy to accept his offer. Now, Yeats described Georgie in a letter to a friend as friendly, serviceable, and very able. Yeah, serviceable. Look, that's not entirely the most romantic thing a poet could say about his betrothed, but it does show that he no longer had the idealistic views on love and marriage that he'd cherished during his long campaign for the heart of Maud Gonne. He'd also underestimated Georgie. This Georgie. She was far from mediocre. Far. So let's have a little bit about Georgie. So born in 1892 in Hampshire to a Bohemian family, Georgie grew up immersed in the world of literary society. She could speak 5 languages and had served as a nurse in World War I. She studied at a prestigious art college. She was highly educated in theatre, music, and European literature, and she was a remarkably accomplished young woman with a brilliant mind. And she even shared Yeats's love of the occult. I think we can all agree that she was more than serviceable. From an early age, family members had claimed that Georgie had psychic abilities, and there were reports of her having had experiences with poltergeists. She grew up to have a scholarly interest in mysticism, and she learnt medieval Latin in order to study ancient magical texts. Yeats must have been aware of her scholarly talents because he'd been her sponsor when she'd applied for membership of the Golden Dawn at the very young age of 17. But don't panic, this was 10 years before they got engaged. Okay, it's all right. So Georgie was 27 and Yeats was 52 when they got married, and a life together, well, as I said at the beginning, it had an underwhelming start. The honeymoon in Yeats's castle in the middle of the forest was disappointing, to say the least. Yeats neglected his vibrant young bride in favour of writing letters to and mournful poetry about, yes, the daughter of Mordgone. Most women in this situation would have insisted on a very, very understandable emotional confrontation, but Georgie did things differently. She suggested that they try their hands at automatic writing. So, automatic writing is writing without the conscious mind and allowing your hand to be guided by either your subconscious mind or by some sort of supernatural force, such as a ghost or a spirit. So, of course, Yeats, being Yeats, was extremely interested in the idea that automatic writing was communication from the other side, and he was delighted to discover that his new bride was very good at receiving messages through this method. He was especially captivated when he realized that she was channeling particularly lyrical and poetic spirits. The spirit that guided Georgie's hand that particular night assured Yeats that he'd done the right thing by marrying George. Overnight, Yeats went from seeing Georgie as serviceable to seeing her as the great love of his life, kismet, his new obsession. Basically how he should have seen her at the start of their relationship. But better late than never. Over the years, the spirits that directed Georgie's hand were very helpful. They advised Yeats about household matters, about his work, even when he and Georgie would try for a baby. Whenever Yeats felt himself falling for another woman, and this did happen occasionally, the spirits would send messages through Georgie that this was a great mistake and that his true happiness was at home. When she'd first started automatic writing, the script was fragmented and messy, but in time her writing became more polished, and the little ghosties gave Georgie the time to write neatly. In around 3 years, Georgie had produced nearly 3,600 pages of automatic script. The spirits all had names like Leaf, Amaritus, and Apple, and they were on call to answer her husband's questions. They were kind of like the Siri or the Alexa or the Hey Google of the spiritual realm. The answers of these spirits often inspired his work, and as supernatural beings can't claim copyright on their words, Yeats took it to mean that their poetic musings were fair use, and he used them liberally in his own writing. He considered Georgie to be the conduit of this divine inspiration, but he never once considered her to be a co-author. And Georgie wasn't unique in being a literary wife with a talent for automatic writing. Lady Jean Conan Doyle, wife of Sherlock Holmes creator Arthur Conan Doyle, was also a spirit writer, and he claimed to have written 15 pages of text from Harry Houdini's departed mother. Spirit writing was a popular parlor game of the time, and it was especially popular with women. But we talk about this more on the Obsession podcast, so if you want to listen to Becky and I get into a discussion, please join us there. So Georgie outlived Yeats by 30 years and spent most of her time overseeing her husband's literary estate. Sadly, she developed alcoholism and died in Dublin in 1986. Georgie never became an author in her own right, but the writing she did for her husband, automatic or otherwise, certainly gave his work a richness and a colour that wasn't there before his marriage. Like many literary wives of the past, her own dreams were just a ghostly scratching of a pen and a muted cry from the other world of a silenced imagination. Thank you for joining us today. And if you want to know more about Georgie Yeats, join Becky and myself on the Obsession podcast. We're going to post it in the comments. So as you can see, we are a new channel. We are going to have a lot of spooky and interesting and all kinds of topics and discussions, so please join us. We would love to see you there. And in the meantime, stay obsessed with weird stuff.